So continuing to the environmental issues, I think air pollution is another major source of pollution, and industries, and not only industries but our vehicular emissions are also causing a severe threat to our atmospheric pollution and atmosphere. So then we have some land pollution issues, we have solid waste management issues, we have hazardous waste disposal and management issues, which include industrial solid waste, which includes hospital waste, which is infectious, and which is very um, of high risk for the human life. So exposure of any human being to this kind of environment can be hazardous and can be a matter of risk. So then we have some biodiversity loss, which includes the wildlife uh, deterioration, and some of the species of the wildlife are being affected by the environmental issues. So like what kind of environmental issues can affect our biodiversity? It includes the global warming, which have an impact on our climate change, which directly affects our rainfall pattern, which directly affects our weather conditions. So our weather conditions are changing because of the uh, immense industrialization and some global warming issues. So all these are directly linked with the biodiversity. So our wildlife pattern is changing. Some of the species are getting extinct. They are no more available on earth. They are getting uh, alleviated. They are no more existing, and so they have become extinct. This is the reason that we have to focus on our biodiversity. We need to provide as natural environment as we could to our this wildlife. Similarly, we have some land degradation issues, which include our this land utilization. We are more involved in construction as compared to agriculture, so we are actually uh, reducing the infiltration of rainfall water. So because of that, we are actually reducing our water resource infiltration to the groundwater. Second, we have some soil degradation due to the soil erosion. While especially while flooding, this soil is going to be degraded, soil is going to be eroded. Then we have some deforestation issues. The forests are depleting. Groundwater exploitation are one of the major issues. We have over exploited our groundwater resource, and we have used groundwater resource, which is so precious for us, for the purpose of irrigation. And then we have industrial and vehicular emissions, global warming issues, ozone layer depletion, natural disasters, and coastal pollutions. All these are the very common environmental issues which we are going to face, which we are facing on daily basis. But we need to have some uh, mm, uh, we need to make some law so that we can reduce the impact of all these pollutions on the environment and on the human life. So in that case, we must link this with our uh, its impact should must be linked with the law. The law must be a clear depiction of the intensity of these issues. More severe the environmental issue, more strict should be the law. So, uh, we will study it in further detail that what are our rules and regulations for our wastewater, for our soils, for our groundwater, for drinking water, and how they are actually linked with their intensity and their severity, and so we will directly link it with that. So, in order to address these environmental issues, the government worked on developing an Environmental Protection Act 1997. So, as earlier we discussed, what is an act? Act is actually something which is made and approved by the parliament, and that has the authority to further develop the rules and regulations, and actually it is going to guide us to develop laws, and then those laws will be further implemented by our judiciary and other uh, law implementing authorities. So just to have a look on the Environmental Protection Act. The Pakistan Environmental Protection Act 1997, established by Pakistan Environment Protection Council, and which consisted of Prime Minister, all ministers in charge of the subject of the environment, and then some non-officials, representatives from commerce, industry, medical, legal professions, and then the EPA was also established under the framework legislation and was created for the primary purpose of administering and implementing its provisions, rules, and regulations. The Park Environment Protection Council has the power to direct government to prepare, promote, and implement projects for the protection, conservation, rehabilitation, and improvement of the environment, as well as the prevention and control of pollution and the sustainable development of resources. These directives can be instituted either at the council's initiative or by the public request. So this is something about our Environment Protection Act 1997. What are who were the developers who made it, who were the stakeholders, and what is the scope? So basically it has the scope to direct government to prepare and promote and the projects for the protection, conservation, and rehabilitation and improvement of the environment, and to prevent the resources, and to control the sustainable development of these resources. So this is something about EPA. We will further discuss it in detail, and we will go into further minute details about this EPA, which will be including its jurisdiction, its scope, and how further it is going to help in the implementation, and for how further it developed the standards, especially NEQS, National Environmental Quality Standards. So here is something which is going to explain some of the fundamentals, because just recently we talked about act. So how act is going to differentiate from the law? Act is something which is going to give us the guidelines for rules and regulations, and law is the resultant of that act. So act is something which is linked with the parliament, which is going to make it, which is going to develop it, and only that parliament has the authority to revise it, to reconsider it, or to make some amendment in it. And while on the other end, law is something which is going to be the kind of enforcement by the judiciary. So it is explained here, and if you go through in this detail, I think you can understand very well. It is not so difficult. If there is any problem, we can discuss in detail. Then we have some differences between law and legislation. So, what is legislation? Legislation is actually the process of making law. Legislation is the process of making law, and again, it has to be passed through the parliament or the regulatory bodies so that it can be implemented and it can be enforced. Now, how this law is going to be linked with our environmental issues, something about the background of environmental legislation. So, if you have a look at it, so government responses to the problems of environmental pollution, and it takes the form of legislative enactment, a process of passing legislation, validation to deal with causes of environmental pollution and its environmental impact, particularly industrial effluents and emissions and noises. So it is all about the making and development, and then legislation can also be an instrument for instituting novel approaches to dispute avoidance and settlement and promoting public participation at all levels in environmental decision making and implementation. Such participation can be secured through the establishment of appropriate local level dispute mediation. So, again, it is, I think, self explanatory. If you go through it, it can be very helpful. And then, how can we differentiate between laws and rules and regulations? Law is enforceable by the judicial system, and that is, those responsible for breaking them can be prosecuted in court. So it's something very uh, um, enforceable, which must be implemented by the judicial system. And then rules are the guidelines that are provided to maintain smooth functioning. So basically, these are the responsibility of any kind of authority to develop rules and regulations. As explained earlier, we have some authorities like WAPDA, we have WASA, we have water regulatory bodies like um, this water ECARDA and this IRSA. So these are the water regulatory bodies which are controlling the water resources in our Indus River, controlling authorities. So these are going to develop some rules and regulations on their own, and these are not so enforceable. These are just to smoothen the process, like as we are going to improve our water resources, what rules and regulations we are supposed to adopt. While if we are going to develop some law, that means we are going to enforce something, and we are going to have a strict monitoring, and we want to have some prosecution of the stakeholders if they are not following the laws. So these are some very strict obligations in the case of law enforcement. So then we have some of the legislations related to the environment which has been conducted so far. It includes Environmental Protection Ordinance. It was brought into act in 1983 and then revised in 1997. Similarly, we have some Wildlife Act, and then we have Agricultural Pesticide Related Act. We have some ordinances about the supply, sewerage and drainage systems, and wildlife and protection of wildlife. So many things about the wildlife. And then we have some environmental policies. These policies are actually to facilitate the reduction of the environmental issues. These are a kind of regulations which are going to help us in planning some projects to improve our environmental quality and environmental status. So far we have National Conservation Strategy, which was developed in 1993, and then we have Provincial Conservation Strategy, which was developed in 1996. So, what are the environmental institutions? These are all the stakeholders which are involved in making laws and making rules and regulations, and then enforcing as well. So some of the major ones are explained here. I think again it is self-explanatory. We have some of the conventions like some of the treaties, protocols which we need to follow, we are bound to follow. So these are the things which we must consider, and we have to plan, we have to make our environmental policies in the view of following these conventions, these treaties, these protocols. So um, basically the purpose of these treaties are to guide overall, not only a single country, not only to focus only on a single region, but overall global enforcement of some of the requirements, especially ozone layer depletion, carbon content control, and which is the basic reason of the ozone layer depletion. So all these things have to be implemented in the form of environmental policy. And these are the institutions which are going to facilitate in this planning and development of the policies. So this will end our today's lecture, because it was a very introductory lecture. Please go through these slides, and furthermore try to search by yourself. Next time I will provide you some um, books and some other materials which will guide you in a better way. And we have also um, something to explain about the development of the uh, national environmental quality standards, and the formation of the act, which will be discussed in detail, not in the next lecture, but maybe uh, after a few lectures. In the next lecture, our focus will be studying the evolution of environmental laws in our country. And basically our laws are based on some of the uh, uh, Indian laws which were developed in our 19th century, because the issue was raised about some sanitation problems, raised about some wildlife issues, raised about some of these species which were getting extinct. So in that era, which was about 1870 or something nearby, some rules and regulations were developed, some laws were formed by the Indian government, or uh, and those laws are still valid, and we will also discuss those laws. And so basically the necessity of making laws is existing for the last a couple of centuries, but we are now more well organized to make the laws in much better way for their better implementation and enforcement. So this was something about the basic introduction to our course, and we will close it here. And I hope, please discuss if anything you need to ask in this regard. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.